Tonight, the campaigns sharpen their messages now that the debates are closed and the advance polls are open.
I'm here for half an hour and I don't care how long it takes because I just want to vote.
With that kind of urgency in the electorate, we're on the trail with the party leaders. Ukraine-Russia talks appear at risk after the U.S. threatens to walk away.
If for some reason one of the two parties makes it very difficult, we're going to just take a pass.
With tariffs rising, productivity stalling, and jobs in jeopardy, we look at the ABCs of recession.
Whether the fall in economic activity is persistent, whether it's pronounced, and whether it's pervasive, the three Ps.
From CBC News, this is The National with Asha Tomlinson.
Thanks for joining us. Advance polls are now open in this federal election, and some long lineups suggest many Canadians are ready to vote. It comes on the heels of two leaders' debates and just as the long weekend gets underway. There's still more than a week left in the race, but with people now marking their ballots, party leaders are also out, hammering home their messages to Canadians, vying for every last vote. Let's start with Julia Wong, as the stage is now set for a furious race to the finish line.
A key sign the election campaign is heading for the home stretch, the opening of advanced polls, drawing long lineups of voters.
It's a busy time, a busy weekend, but it's also really, really important for our country. So I think it's important to get it off the list.
I've been here for half an hour and I don't care how long it takes because I just want to vote.
I had to vote. I have to vote. You have to, especially at this time.
In an election some call one of the most consequential in Canada's history, party leaders are trying to convince undecided voters why they should lead the country. At Niagara Falls, a natural divide between Canada and the U.S., Liberal leader Mark Carney said he is best suited to deal with the cross-border chasm created by Donald Trump.
The key question in this election is who is best placed to respond? Who will stand up to President Trump? I think I know not just what it takes to survive a crisis, to get through a crisis, but what it takes to emerge stronger than before.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre repeatedly leaned into his message that it's time for a new government.
This election is about change. After the lost Liberal decade of rising costs and crime and a falling economy, the Liberals do not deserve a fourth term in power. We need a change.
Bloc Québécois leader Yves-Francois Blanchet appealed to the party's traditional voters.
Nobody loves Quebec more than a Quebecer. And this love might make a difference when comes the moment to pick a vote on April 28.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh highlighted how New Democrats will keep the government accountable.
Ottawa does work best when one party doesn't have all the power. I'm going to let people know on the last 10 days of this campaign.
Those advanced polls will be open from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. through the Easter long weekend.
Okay, Julia, 10 days out, and most parties haven't even released costed platforms.
So far, the only party that has is the Bloc Québécois. Both the Liberals and the NDP say they will unveil their platforms on Saturday, and there's no word from the Conservatives.
And still lots of questions about the Debates Commission canceling last night's scrums.
Yeah, so there was a confrontation last night in the media room between journalists and some independent media outlets accredited by the commission. That led to the post-debate press conferences with the leaders being canceled. Several of the party leaders were asked about the commission's handling of the situation. Both Singh and Blanchet said that they're now focused on their campaigns, and Carnet suggested there be some time for reflection before feedback is given on how things can be improved.
Thanks for breaking it down for us, Julia Wong in Ottawa. Pierre Poilievre was also asked about the debate scrum decision. You'll hear about that now as our campaign reporters deliver a rapid-fire rundown from today's campaign trail.
I'm Kat Tunney with the Conservatives. As this election campaign turns the corner into the final stretch, leader Pierre Poilievre says he'll bring plastic bags and straws back. Speaking from a recycling plant in Montreal, Poilievre promised to end the federal ban on single-use plastics, a policy that is currently tied up in the courts. Poilievre's announcement comes on the heels of last night's debate, where tensions became so heated due to the presence of the right-wing media outlet Rebel News, the traditional post-debate scrum was canceled. Poilievre was asked, given the ruckus, whether the debate commission should be abolished. The Conservative leader was also asked whether he'd still fire the Bank of Canada governor, a promise that has been a staple of his speeches. Poilievre didn't respond to those questions. When journalists shouted for him to clarify his position, his staff moved in to surround reporters and drown them out with clapping.
I'm Karina Roman, traveling with the Liberal campaign. In Niagara Falls, Ontario, across from Niagara Falls, New York, Liberal leader Mark Carney says the fractures in the Canada-U.S. relationship in the form of tariffs and sovereignty threats will be felt more keenly here and in other border towns than anywhere else in Canada. But at last night's English debate, Carney said that China was this country's greatest security threat. Today, he was asked if Canada can afford a trade war with both its biggest trading partners. He responded by saying there is tremendous opportunity for trade with countries in Europe and Southeast Asia, whose values have not shifted away from Canada's. Carney says the relationship between the country and the U.S. will eventually be better than it is right now, but it also will never be the same as it was.
I'm Marina von Stackelberg, traveling with the NDP campaign. We are in BC, where leader Jagmeet Singh is voting in the advanced polls in his riding of Burnaby Central. His own seat could be at risk. While he fights to keep NDP support here, he started the day campaigning in a rural riding north of Montreal, with a familiar face who is running again. Ruth Ellen Brosseau was part of Jack Layton's Orange Wave in 2011. That's when the New Democrats swept 59 seats in Quebec to become the official opposition. At the time, Brosseau was 27, had never stepped foot in the riding she represented, and didn't speak French. She now lives there on a farm and is completely fluent. She has tried unsuccessfully to win the riding back in the last two elections from the Bloc Québécois.
I'm Evan Dyer, traveling with the Bloc Québécois. Today in Terrebonne, Quebec, Bloc leader Yves-Francois Blanchet proposed to exempt first-time buyers of new homes from the GST up to a value of $750,000, a proposal similar to that of other parties. He also said he hopes to win back voters in this last week of the campaign, focusing on traditional Bloc voters who he says have strayed away out of fear of a Pierre Poilievre victory. He says that with the debates over, those voters are now more confident that the Conservatives won't form the next government, and he says he hopes that will bring them back to the Bloc, which is now trailing Mark Carney's Liberals by about 20 points in Quebec.
Manufacturers in this country are trying to cope with a new business reality. Significant cost increases resulting from the U.S.-led trade war. But in many cases, the U.S. tariffs aren't the issue. As Anis Haidari explains, the cause of the worry is Canadian tariffs.
So these tanks are our heaviest tariffed item, between $16,000 and $24,000 a week.
Tariffs already cost Derek Friesen big bucks. His company makes farm equipment in rural Manitoba.
So these are some of the fittings that we can only get in the U.S.
It requires American plastics, recently tariffed by Canada.
The shipment is $4,800, $1,800, $5,000.
He doesn't have a duty-free alternative yet.
Everything coming into Canada is what we've been paying tariffs on, and it caught us off guard a little bit with the extent of it.
It's meant suspending some shipments and maybe cutting profits to keep people employed. But now Ottawa has announced 6 months of relief from some tariffs, a move this customs broker says could help.
It will make a huge difference to some companies that import goods that are part of the health system, part of the food chain, manufacturing, when they're now going to be able to import U.S. products as long as it helps Canadian companies manufacture and resell.
That applies to Derek Friesen. He needs to import to manufacture in Canada.
Some of this product we can't get in Canada. Some of it Canada would have capability to manufacture it, but it would take probably a full year plus to develop tooling and processes to do it here. It's not something that you can switch very quick.
So a 6-month break from Ottawa might not cut it. After taking in that news, he's got mixed feelings.
Sort of excited, but a lot of skepticism. There is just no options for us that I can do faster than 14 to 18 months. So I don't know what's going to happen as we get closer to that date. I'm like, it's hard.
A welcome delay, but it's still a problem postponed. Anis Haidari, CBC News, Calgary.
Some airlines are changing their summer plans as a growing number of Canadians are avoiding travel to the United States. Paula Duhatschek explains how they're adjusting and what it could mean for your wallet.
Okay, go around to the front tag right here.
At the Calgary International Airport, travelers say there's one place that's not on their summer bucket list.
Definitely avoiding U.S. travel.
I'm going to go to Toronto, I'm going to go to Europe, and I'm not going to U.S. this summer.
So you're staying in Canada and enjoy the summer here.
Summer bookings between major Canadian cities and popular U.S. destinations are down nearly 20% compared to last year. That's according to analytics firm Cirium, which looks at data from travel agencies and booking websites. It's a blow to airlines that usually make good money from all those Vegas bachelor parties and family trips to Disneyland.
Canada and the United States have so many bonds, business, visiting friends and family, travelers, leisure travelers going to Florida in the wintertime and vice versa. So this is particularly unusual that you're going to see softening of demand between Canada and the United States.
Airlines are trimming service to the U.S. and adding more capacity overseas. WestJet recently introduced new flights from Halifax to Amsterdam and Barcelona. Air Canada announced a new flight to Edinburgh and more capacity to Paris, Rome, and Athens. For the most part, though, airlines are banking on Canadians exploring their own backyard. Cirium says bookings between popular Canadian destinations are trending up by about 11% for July compared to last year.
The increase in capacity in Canada is going to be as a direct response to the softening of demand between Canada and the United States.
With airlines adding all that extra capacity within Canada, some experts say this summer could be a good time to get a deal.
The odds are we're going to have a little bit of a fare war in Canada this summer.
As for the airlines, they're still figuring out where to fly now that the skies aren't so friendly. Paula Duhatschek, CBC News, Calgary.
New developments today in the U.S. deportation case that exemplifies that country's political divisions. The man at the center, sent to an El Salvador prison, got a visit from a U.S. lawmaker. Katie Nicholson picks the story up from here and shows why it's putting the U.S. Constitution to the test.
The people united.
Moments after touching down, Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen conveyed a message to Kilmer Abrego Garcia's family and friends.
He said that thinking of you, members of his family, is what gave him the strength to persevere, to keep going day to day, even under these awful circumstances.
The lawmaker got a brief meeting with the father of three Thursday night, nearly a month after he was picked up by immigration officials and mistakenly deported to a notorious El Salvador super prison. He's since been moved to another detention center. Federal courts have demanded the government facilitate his return. So far, the Trump administration has refused.
This case is not just about one man. It's about protecting the constitutional rights of everybody who resides in the United States of America.
The president quick to dunk on the Democratic senator.
He's a fake. I know him. I know them all. They're all fake. And they have no interest in that prisoner.
And repeated a familiar line about Abrego Garcia.
Is an illegal alien, MS-13 gang member and foreign terrorist.
Abrego Garcia's lawyers say that's not true and say he doesn't have a criminal record. But the White House has repeatedly doubled down.
Nothing will change the fact that Abrego Garcia will never be a Maryland father. He will never live in the United States of America again.
Thursday evening, a blistering order from an appeals court chastised the government for asserting a right to stash away residents of this country in foreign prisons without the semblance of due process that is the foundation of our constitutional order, and warned that the judicial and the executive branches of government are grinding irrevocably against one another in a conflict that promises to diminish both. Setting the stage for what many fear could be a constitutional crisis if it comes down to the president openly defying an order from the highest court in the land.
And Katie, the clock is ticking for the government.
Yeah, so right now, the district court judge in Maryland has ordered DOJ lawyers to clear their schedules and provide documents and make government officials available for depositions so that the court can get to the bottom of what, if anything, has been done around the order to return Abrego Garcia. And they have only until April 23rd. If they fail to do that, the judge could find them in contempt.
Katie Nicholson in Washington, thank you. The new U.S. ambassador to Israel made his first public appearance on the last weekend of the Passover holiday. Mike Huckabee placed a note in a crack of the Western Wall, which he said was written by U.S. President Donald Trump, praying for peace. His visit comes as Israel's military launched airstrikes at dozens of targets across Gaza. Palestinian health authorities say at least 30 people were killed. Pressure is mounting tonight on Russia and Ukraine to end the war and fast. If not, the United States is threatening to walk away from peace talks. Sam Sampson on what that might mean for the rest of the world, including Canada.
Volunteers hand out Easter cakes in Russian-controlled Ukraine, a sweet reprieve for those desperate for peace. We can't wait for the truce, this resident says. We don't just hope for it, we can't wait for it. But that truce is still in question. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance says he's optimistic about American bartered peace talks. But hours earlier, the U.S. Secretary of State said this.
We need to determine very quickly now, and I'm talking about in a matter of days, whether or not this is doable over the next few weeks. If it is, we're in. If it's not, then we have other priorities to focus on.
Later, the president confirmed he's considering backing out.
If for some reason one of the two parties makes it very difficult, we're just going to say you're foolish, you're fools, you're horrible people, and we're going to just take a pass. But hopefully we won't have to do that.
In his presidential run, Trump said he could end the war in a day.
As soon as they run into a bit of turbulence, they threaten to walk away. Now, we all know who the big block is to peace. It is Russia. They have not honored any of their agreements. They're always putting up obstacles, delaying the talks or extending its implementation. So on the one hand, I can understand the frustration, but you know what, guys? I'm sorry, that's what diplomacy is. It's hard work.
We should continue to support Ukraine.
It isn't clear what this U.S. threat might mean for U.S. aid. But if it goes away, analysts say countries that are helping may first have to beef up their own resources.
We cannot help Ukraine more unless we also revive our atrophied and diminished armed forces and defense production capabilities.
For now, the war continues, with both Ukraine and Russia striking regions overnight, leaving the people at the heart of this war still wishing for peace. Sam Sampson, CBC News, Edmonton.
The drummer for Canadian indie rock band The New Pornographers is in jail in the U.S. tonight, charged with possession of child pornography. Police in California say 44-year-old Joe Siders was arrested after multiple reports, including from an 11-year-old boy who said a man recorded him while he was using a restaurant bathroom. Siders faces multiple charges. His band said in a statement they're shocked, horrified, and have severed all ties. Ahead of BC's busy hiking season, search and rescue teams are getting a boost from emerging technology.
Now do you see him? It's pretty wild, hey?
How drones and artificial intelligence are helping get lost hikers home. Plus, the rise of faith-based entertainment.
When baby Jesus came into the world.
What's behind the growing demand for biblical stories. And the moment a colossal squid was captured on video in the ocean for the first time.
You never know when you go down to these depths. There's always a surprise.
We're back in 2. New details tonight about a deadly cable car crash near Naples in Italy. Authorities say tourists from the UK and Israel were among 4 people killed when a cable reportedly snapped and the car fell to the ground. Prosecutors have opened an investigation into the crash. Vancouver's famous North Shore mountains are visited by thousands of people every year, but some of those trips don't go according to plan. As Georgie Smythe shows us, local search and rescue teams are using cutting-edge technology to find those who get lost faster than ever.
All right, let's go find them.
In Vancouver's steep, lush and rain-soaked mountains, more than 100 people get lost every year.
Oh, got him already.
But emerging technology is making it easier to find them.
Now do you see him? It's pretty wild, hey?
This is the view from a North Shore rescue drone. Equipped with thermal imaging software, it picks up a person's heat print even in dense trees.
This is our thermal drone. It actually has 3 cameras, so the thermal imaging camera.
It's a game changer for Canada's busiest volunteer search and rescue team, already saving a lost hiker in the mountains late last year.
And it was on my last battery after we had a very faint call out in a direction that I actually spotted the subject. He had fallen in some creeks. It was about -6, so if the team hadn't found him that night, I think it would have been more of a recovery.
The functionality of the drones has been in development for months, but they can now be deployed beside the team's helicopters and ground crew.
So of course this could fit my backpack.
And it could soon include support from artificial technology.
Okay, so we have a detection in the corner of the screen there.
This drone is fitted with AI software developed in Squamish that can detect bright colors or movement in a landscape, anything that doesn't belong that could help find a missing person.
Like a color through a tree canopy or some bit of motion. And the operator is really looking for anomalies. And so our computer vision system is basically doing the same.
Visual recognition software North Shore Rescue says it may start to use in a few months.
So the message would be, don't wear green and brown?
Don't wear green and brown. Wear bright colors.
And of course, tell others where you're going and when you'll be back. Georgie Smythe, CBC News, North Vancouver.
Weeks into the U.S. trade war, some economists say it is likely Canada is already in a recession.
100% sure. The only question for me now is how deep and how long.
Coming up, we break down what it means to be in a recession. Plus, how Donald Trump and his trade war are shaping the federal election campaign in Quebec.
It's a danger, becoming the 51st state? No, that doesn't sound good.
The National breaks down the stories shaping our world. Next. Thousands gathered at Rome's Colossal for the Good Friday Way of the Cross ceremony. Pope Francis skipped it for a 3rd year in a row, along with other Good Friday appearances. The pontiff is recovering from a near-fatal bout of pneumonia. Christian-themed stories are doing well on both the big and small screen. And as Magda Gaberselassie shows us, for viewers, the appeal goes beyond the fact that they're straight from the Bible.
Listen carefully.
The secret's out. Biblical stories have made a comeback on the big and small screen.
People want to see epic storytelling.
Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees!
Season 5 of The Chosen, a series about Jesus and his disciples, is in theaters now.
About 30% of our audience globally does not identify as religious or church-going.
Over time, the show reports it's reached more than 280 million viewers.
I think with everything that's happening on the world stage, the divisiveness politically, the conflict that we're seeing in every part of the globe, I think people are hungry for something.
When baby Jesus came into the world.
Also in theaters, the animated King of Kings, with Charles Dickens telling the story of Jesus.
Goliath!
And on TV, House of David is a big hit for Amazon Prime.
What studios see, they see the audiences, they see the numbers, they see the dollars.
This entertainment reporter credits the current interest to the success of The Chosen and the contemporary film Sound of Freedom.
God's children are not for sale.
The 2023 hit made more than $250 million at the box office.
Because of the story it was telling about child trafficking, it was ringing a bell for people.
It's interesting because it's not an explicitly Christian film, but at the same time, it was almost marketed like that.
This priest, who also reviews movies, thinks there's another contributing factor to the current interest in faith-based content.
I think before, the focus was on making Christian films with the purpose of catechesis or evangelization. And now I think people are just focused on making good films.
And more films are on the way, including the sequel to The Passion of the Christ, which goes into production this summer. Magda Gabriel-Salas, CBC News, Toronto.
Now it's time to break down the stories shaping our world. In Quebec, the U.S. threat is pushing voters toward Canadian sovereignty.
It's a danger, you know, becoming the 51st state.
But first,
Malaysia, Cambodia. Oh, look at Cambodia, 97%.
Donald Trump's tariff obsession is a throwback, a policy failure in the past.
Backfired completely on McKinley and the Republicans who were in power at the time.
And it could lead to danger in the future.
So what I'm concerned about is the world is dividing itself up into mutually hostile blocs.
Eli Glasner breaks down Trump's love affair with tariffs and how they're tied to an apparently hazy memory of American history, a history that led to worldwide disaster and that some fear could be repeated.
William McKinley.
McKinley. Trump has an obsession. His favorite president,
William McKinley, highly underrated.
at the time he thinks America was richest.
In the 1890s, we were so wealthy.
All revolving around one word.
Tariffs. Tariffs. I love tariffs.
He loves tariffs, but why? And does he understand the effect they've had in the past? Well, for that, we need to go back to the dawn of Trump's favorite era.
It all started with what was called the Gilded Age.
It's not quite as simple as that.
Maybe you've seen the show, but there's another America hiding behind the opulence.
It's impossible to argue with him because he's not talking about facts.
Margaret Macmillan is an award-winning historian.
America was not at its riches. It wasn't a particularly happy society. There was a huge division between the rich and the poor, and the condition of the poor was appalling. They didn't have a lot of protections that they have now.
Which brings us to this guy, the politician who Trump admired so much, he renamed a mountain.
And we will restore the name of a great president, William McKinley, to Mount McKinley, where it should be and where it belongs.
President Trump is a 20th century man operating in a 21st century economy who wants to take us back to the 19th century. The world is just so different today.
Douglas Irwin is a world-renowned expert on trade and the politician once described as the Napoleon of protection.
He's a very talented Republican politician. He represented a district in Ohio, which produced a lot of steel, which is where his interest in tariffs came from.
In Congress before he was president, McKinley instituted aggressive tariffs on imports to grow American manufacturing. But along with growing the number of factories, prices also grew.
He was the tariff king.
And so the effect of the McKinley tariffs?
It backfired completely on McKinley and the Republicans who were in power at the time, and eventually led to them losing the presidency, the House, and the Senate.
History podcaster Craig Baird says aggressive tariffs also affected an election north of the border. Sound familiar?
In 1891, with the federal election, it actually had Johnny MacDonald really campaigning on the tariffs and on Canadian nationalism and starting trade elsewhere, and that led him to win the 1891 election.
The thing is, for all his adoration, Trump ignores what happened when McKinley actually became president and his perspective shifted.
He was still a Republican, still a protectionist, but he saw that there were markets in the world to be had. The U.S. had this great industrial expansion, and the U.S. should be more engaged in global trade.
In fact, in 1901, just days before he was assassinated, McKinley made a speech promoting friendly trade relations, saying commercial wars are unprofitable.
So, lesson learned, right? And yet in just a few decades, Americans would tangle with them again. So it's time to talk about the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. I know, try to contain your excitement, except you might have heard of this one.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone? The Great Depression, passed the, anyone? The tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act.
So after the stock market crash of 1929, Republicans wanted to protect American businesses, but
it just made things worse. You know, you might think that if you reduce your imports, that you might give the economy a little bit of boost because you're going to shift some of that to domestic production. But if other countries are also throwing up trade barriers, that means your exports are going to go down too.
For those of us who lived through the Great Depression, the memory of the suffering it caused is deep and searing.
As a young man, President Ronald Reagan felt the effects of tariffs firsthand.
High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. The result is more and more tariffs, higher and higher trade barriers, and less competition.
The lessons of the Great Depression saw the Republicans embracing the gospel of free trade until Trump.
We keep repeating certain things, and there's always a number of decades between stuff like this because we forget what actually happened, and we start looking at it again through rose-colored glasses.
Flash forward to 2018, during Trump's first term. Tariff time once again. The target?
China.
After a series of tit-for-tat tariffs, Trump applied levies on $200 billion worth of Chinese products.
Frankly, it's going to make us a much stronger, much richer nation.
Is it fair to say that prices went up after the tariffs went into effect in the first term?
There are a number of academic studies on that, and they show exactly that the tariffs were passed through to consumers, so it was not a tax on China. It was a tax on American consumers.
So to recap, numerous times in America's history, tariffs made tension and prices rise. And yet here we are again, tariffs already applied on a variety of Canadian sectors, and now the US and China facing off in an escalating tariff battle. Trump thinks China will blink. Others aren't so sure.
I don't think he understands much about the Chinese past, about the strong desire of the Chinese to become a world power again and to resume what they see as their rightful place on the world stage.
As trade alliances weaken, Macmillan sees echoes of the years leading up to the First World War.
And we know that it's very, very hard to build up trust between people or between groups of people or between nations. And we're seeing now how easy it is to destroy it. And so what I'm concerned about is the world is dividing itself up into mutually hostile blocs.
I wonder just what it feels like for you right now, Margaret, where I've had the feeling the past few months where, like, oh, this is what it feels like when history is happening in front of you.
I feel exactly the same. I mean, I've studied some very interesting bits of the past, often catastrophic bits of the past, but I didn't think I'd be living through one.
That's Eli Glasner, and as he showed us, sweeping tariffs were blamed for deepening the Great Depression. As Farah Nasser shows us, now the worry is recession.
U.S. President Donald Trump's ever-changing trade war has sent the stock market on a turbulent ride. And with all the uncertainty, there's one word we keep hearing.
A possible recession. The probability of a recession.
The threat of a recession. It's a real threat.
Some economists say it's likely already here.
I'm 100% sure that we are in a recession. The only question for me now is how deep and how long.
When stock markets plummet, like we saw after Trump's initial sweeping global tariff announcement, it can signal advance notice, but the stock market isn't the economy. So how do we know if we're in a recession? There's no government institution that officially declares a recession, but economists have a generally accepted definition. They look at gross domestic product, the total value of goods and services a country produces. Think everything from a PEI potato to a haircut, and the total income generated. When the GDP has 2 back-to-back quarters or 6 straight months of negative growth, like during the global financial crisis or during the pandemic, that's considered a recession. The problem is we have to wait for Statistics Canada to publish its quarterly numbers to know if the tariffs provoked a recession. But we've just finished the first quarter, so the earliest that confirmation could come is the summer. Economists with the C.D. Howe Institute's Business Cycle Council meet when they think a recession is looming.
You guys aren't meeting yet.
We're waiting for more data to come out before making the decision to meet.
The group identifies recession start and end dates in Canada.
We look at a broader definition, looking at whether the fall in economic activity is persistent, whether it's pronounced, and whether it's pervasive, the 3 Ps.
For example, rising unemployment rates are a key marker, which Canada saw in March.
One way to feel it beyond your own employment situation is to look at the employment situation in your community, your friends, your family. Is there uncertainty in jobs or people losing their jobs?
Another clue economists look at is how much manufacturers are able to sell. That number is at a 15-month low. And of course, there's rising inflation.
We are in a really bad situation where prices might go up while jobs go down.
Historically, most recessions are triggered by a shock to the economy.
It's a whole lot easier to start a recession than it is to end one.
This is a moment where everybody is feeling some kind of fear and uncertainty about their future. That's a hallmark of recession.
Another uncertainty that economists are factoring into their assessment: Trump's tariff policies could change again.
Most of what's happening right now is self-inflicted. If the president, as he just did, pauses the tariffs or preferably gives people more certainty that they're not coming back, I mean, you could see a world in which economic activity rebounds.
This is going to be a real test of leadership for anybody that wins the crown in the next federal election.
That's Farah Nasser reporting from Toronto. Still ahead, in the crucial battleground of Quebec, how Donald Trump's threats are shifting the polls.
We really need to look at the big picture. We need to think as a country right now and not individually as provinces.
More from Quebec next. In Quebec, Donald Trump's tariffs are now the key ballot issue.
It's simply killing the economy. It influences the current politics.
His threats?
Canada only works as a state.
Have even Quebec sovereigntists backing Canada.
We're pretty much Canadians that speak French, right?
And so far, one party is riding that wave. Jonathan Montpetit talks to voters in Quebec as they confront the cross-border reality being felt across the country.
This is what the trade war looks like in Quebec. At this industrial textile company, the machines are usually operating around the clock. 80 people are usually working the factory floor, making webbing for the seatbelts found in nearly a quarter of all North American cars and trucks, and in half of the world's airplanes.
But with what the current U.S. administration is doing, it's simply killing the economy.
Hugo Boisclair is Beltec's co-president.
It's slowing down the economy. It creates uncertainty. It creates volatility, which are the two worst enemies of the economy.
Boisclair says the company cut production as sales began to dry up because of tariffs, sending his workers home 2 days a week. It wasn't Boisclair's first choice, but it beat the alternative.
Our orders are down. We had to do something, so we did not want to do layoffs. We need to keep our expertise. We need to keep our labor.
These are the kinds of hard decisions consuming many in Quebec, where both business owners and voters are making compromises to deal with the changing economic climate.
What is happening right now is so major, so important. I would expect everybody has its own opinion, and of course, it influences the current politics that we're currently having. What used to apply 6 months, a year, 6 months, 2 months ago, no longer applies today.
Beltec is in Granby, about an hour's drive southeast of Montreal, the largest town in a largely francophone riding.
The Bloc Québécois won this riding of Shefford from the Liberals in 2019 amid a resurgence of Quebec nationalism. And just a few months ago, the Bloc looked set to hold on to the riding in the coming election. But as you're about to hear, economics has replaced language and culture as the #1 issue for many voters.
At the Granby Local Food Festival, voters are trying to decide what issues on their wish list should take priority.
We really need to look at the big picture. We need to think as a country right now and not individually as provinces.
This woman says she wants someone with experience in economics leading the country, and that for her is Liberal leader Mark Carney.
I mean, it's a danger, becoming the 51st state. No, that doesn't sound good.
Even this Bloc supporter says Quebec can't afford to think of itself as separate from the rest of the country right now.
We're pretty much Canadians that speak French, right? We're Canadians just like the rest of us. We're with us, we're with you guys, we're a team.
According to the CBC News poll tracker, the Liberals are leading by nearly 20 points in Quebec over the Bloc and the Conservatives. The lead is all the more striking given that Carney himself only rates his French as a 6 on 10, and he's made a series of gaffes while campaigning in the province.
Nous sommes d'accord avec Hamas, nous sommes d'accord avec tous.
Nous ne sommes pas d'accord avec Hamas.
During the Liberal leadership race, he mistakenly said that everyone agreed with Hamas when he meant the opposite.
Bonjour,
Good morning.
He called Natalie Provost, one of his star candidates in the province, by the wrong name.
Natalie Provost, à Montréal.
And said the École Polytechnique massacre happened at Concordia and had to apologize. On Quebec's most watched talk show, Tout le monde en parle, host Guy Lepage said it can seem like he doesn't know much about the province.
Qu'est-ce que vous connaissez ou vous aimez du Québec?
He pressed Carnet to name something, anything he liked about Quebec. Carnet eventually named his singer.
How is it possible that somebody like Carney would find his way into the hearts of Quebecers?
Michel Séauger is a columnist for La Presse and one of Quebec's best-known political commentators.
Maybe he didn't find his way in the hearts of Quebecers, but in their minds. It's not a usual election. The ballot question for once in Quebec is the same as in the rest of the country, which is who do you want to send to negotiate with Donald Trump? And to that question, the answer of Quebecers is not very different from the answer of the rest of the Canadians. Carney seems to have what it takes to take on Trump.
There are other signs that Quebecers are ready to rethink their relationship with the rest of Canada and make compromises for the sake of their economic future. Recent polling suggests around 60% of Quebecers now support pipeline projects that were deeply unpopular in the past.
What has changed since then?
Marc Perdon studies environmental politics at the Université du Québec à Montréal.
Well, what's changed is Trump has arrived into power and has been challenging with his rhetoric Canadian sovereignty. And what's I think interesting is that even in Quebec, that's had a real impact on how people see themselves, their identity.
Va travailler avec le gouvernement du Québec.
The Conservatives are hoping to benefit from this change of heart. Leader Pierre Poilievre has campaigned in Quebec on his promise to get more oil and gas projects built. Not so long ago, that would have been a risky political move.
Madame Provost va faire sa campagne, mais qu'elle devrait.
The Bloc is sticking with its traditional opposition to any new pipelines crossing into the province, but it doesn't seem to be winning the party any new supporters.
Quebec nationalism will always be there, it's obvious. I know people who are sovereignists who voted yes since the 1980 referendum and who say, well, this year, no, the stakes are too high. And there'll never be an independent Quebec if we're swallowed into the United States.
And so Quebecers appear to be ready to accept things they once wouldn't have.
So I think there is a shift in mentality because people got knocked down. We will rise back up. We're a resilient population. We'll rise back up, but it changes the way of thinking.
As the election nears, so many in the province are figuring out how to survive in a global economy dominated by uncertainty.
And we're just working like hell to get the business back and increase back to 5 days again.
That is Jonathan Montpetit with that story from Quebec. Up next, a colossal squid filmed for the first time in the wild.
Out of the murkiness, I saw a little blue shape.
The accidental discovery in our moment. Okay, you're looking at a colossal squid never before seen in its natural habitat. This footage was taken during a research expedition in the South Atlantic Ocean near the South Sandwich Islands. It was later verified by scientists, but when Benjamin Irwin spotted it, he didn't know what he was looking at. And tonight, his unintentional find makes our moment.
Had no idea what it was. We were piloting a remotely operated vehicle deep underwater, looking for different types of animals and geology. I was down at around 600 meters depth, and we were trying to maneuver around this iceberg. Out of the murkiness, I saw a little blue shape. I thought I'd steal a few minutes to take some shots, but it was only a day or two afterwards. There was people buzzing in the computer room on the ship, and they were talking about this colossal squid. I was like, wow, we saw a colossal squid? That's incredible. Nobody told me it was that little guy that we saw a couple days before on my shift. I had no idea that they were celebrating this and that it was happening. I didn't do anything special. I'll go get a pina colada or something at the pool, and it was a very interesting sight.
So cool. To throw some stats at you, experts believe the colossal squid can grow up to 7 meters or 23 feet in length and weigh up to 1,100 pounds. When you look at it, you wouldn't think that. It was discovered on the 100-year anniversary of it first being identified and named. Pretty cool stuff. Thank you for being with us. You can watch anywhere, anytime on the free CBC News app and subscribe to the National's YouTube channel. I'm Asha Tomlinson. Take care.